quick thing coming to you here Saturday morning because I'm imagining some folks wasting time and tearing their hair out over stuff that ultimately is not super important. Um, Many of you, a third, probably, maybe half, we're struggling to get off the launch pad entirely, and I completely feel you on that. In terms of taking data and just turning it into a graphic, right? It's just, you're having a hard time. And I was able to replicate all of the problems that I saw on Thursday this morning by just screwing around. And I can't solve them all in the sense that you'd have to be fairly advanced um, in generating graphics in Excel to solve all of those. But what I want to suggest is this, and this is I think a comment for nearly the whole class, and then on big picture stuff, and then some super tactical stuff to try and just save you some time and get you into a world where you've got some graphics to work with and you can start thinking about storyline and how you want to tell the story and that kind of thing. The big picture thing is you just want to figure out what story you want to tell primarily, and then figure out what data you need in order to tell it. The normal way of doing things is to start playing with the data, which I basically encouraged you to do because I think it's part of the skill that we need to develop here is to just figure out how to do this stuff. But the normal thing is to start playing with the data and then playing with it and see what you find that's interesting. You do need to do that first, but it can't become show and tell at that point where you say, "Ooh, here's this interesting thing I found." Right? I think most of you were probably in a good place as far as being able to say, "Okay, here's a story I want to tell," but then we're just struggling to be able to get the data to actually show up. So if the big thing is figure out the story you want to tell, decide what data you need in order to tell it, and then you're sort of going, okay, how do I make this thing show up graphically? The the very tactical advice, and then I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, is um, be ruthless about just cutting and pasting stuff into very simple little piles of data that you can then turn into a graphic. What I did in the initial long video was to really lay out, like, hiding columns and all this kind of stuff, how to play with it, how to turn something into a graphic. And many of you were able to follow that and get something out of it. Here's the other approach, which is sort of the dummy's guide to doing graphics in Excel. And I'm absolutely there for the most part, right? I'm not the advanced Excel user, but you can get some pretty decent stuff if you keep it simple. So what you can see here on the screen is just if you basically what's going on is what we've been using is there's artificial intelligence stuff in there that's trying to guess what it is we're trying to display, and it does a good job when the data is really simple and there's not much there. The more information is in it, the worse the AI is. Okay, like that's just the basics of what's going on. So if you take, and you can see here, I've just got some super basic data on the screen, and I'm going to ask the thing to suggest some charts. And important, just a few things. So this is University of Minnesota, and this is University of St. Thomas. You got the two different categories over these time periods. Important that what you do is you select the column headers and then the stuff that you want to do. If you just select one school and you go like this and say, hey, suggest some, you go to charts, clustered column, you basically get a very pretty simple thing. Looks nice, totally usable. At this point, all you need to do is go through and name the chart title, whatever you want to name it, and boom, you're off to the races. Um, the artificial intelligence becomes very stupid the moment you toss in anything more complicated than that. And there are solutions to this, but now what's happening, because I've selected two schools, right? Minnesota and St. Thomas. It now thinks that we want a sum. Okay. You'd have to do a fair bit of work to unpack that. And you know what? As it turns out, and this is sort of the blind squirrel occasionally finds a nut, the AI here gave you something that might actually not be that bad, right? To show to the board, you'd say, well, look, if you aggregate a 6-year period, this is what you see. Maybe that's useful. But the point is, what you'd probably do if you don't want to go down the rabbit hole of trying to fix this, you could. There's no shame in having one chart that's University of Minnesota, right? You do that, boom, And you could even potentially lay it on the same slide or the same page. Just below that, have St. Thomas, right? You can do that. Is it ideal? No, it's not ideal. But the other thing I'll say is the more data you have um, on on a slide, the harder it is to explain what the thing is, and far more importantly, the harder it is for the audience to understand what the heck the thing is. And so, this, while simple, is really easy to understand. You put the chart title up there, everybody's happy, right? What you could even do for this to simplify it further, since the chart title is going to tell them what the name of the institution is just take that stuff out of there. You don't even need this column actually, and you know what you're going to do with it. And so you go like this. It's very simple. You ask the device to make you a chart. It suggests a chart. You pick it, you put the title in there, you've got your years, and you'll title it University of Minnesota because that's what it is. And then you could go through and do the same thing here, right? And we know that this is St. Thomas, and so here it suggests St. Thomas, fine. And then all the same stuff. The basic thrust of this is the less data you've got that you select and ask it to do something, the more likely you are to have it automatically um, throw you some charts that are pretty good to begin with. Let me note something, right? I mentioned, I think before, try to grab those column headers. In this case, it's solvable because you can actually click on this, but notice I didn't grab the column headers. This is a St. Thomas data. I didn't grab the column headers. So what do I get? It doesn't know what this stuff is. It just says Series 1 and Series 2, right? You can actually edit that. Um, and there's a way to get in there, and maybe it's format data series or something like that. So you can double click on it and go through all kinds of trouble. The right way to do this, of course, is to make sure that and again, if it involves cutting and pasting, copying, pasting, whatever, get it so that you've grabbed the column headers and it's going to automatically label those um, correctly, as I believe it did. Yeah, as it did for the University of Minnesota chart. This is just an example, but my point is, if you're tearing your hair out trying to get stuff to kind of work, strip it down, keep it simple, figure out what data you want, and then just copy and paste it into a separate little thing. Make sure, and you can put whatever, headers you want on there, right? Rename them. I think that's a good practice to always do that so that they're as plain English as possible, and then just see what the thing gives you. Obviously, you can do this manually. There's other ways to do it that are more sophisticated. And if you're at that place, awesome, go to town. I can do some of that myself too, but I just want you guys to be able to move forward on this quickly. So that's what I got to say this Saturday morning. Have a good week, a good fall break, and do email me or reach out or whatever if you have questions. Thanks.